Imagine being 12 years old, 12, and married off to a man 3 times your age, not for love, not by choice, but because a father owed a favor, or because a family's fragile honor depended on it. This wasn't rare. It was the harsh reality for countless girls in the ancient world, a reality so normalized that few even questioned it. In our modern world, marriage is often understood as a partnership between equals, built on affection, trust, and shared dreams for the future. But in ancient cultures, marriage was something else entirely: a contract, a cold transaction designed to secure bloodlines, property, and alliances. For women, especially for young girls, it was almost never about personal choice. It was about duty, obedience, and preserving the family's reputation at any cost. So how did this look in practice? In ancient Greece, marriage was not about romance, but civic obligation. Records show that Athenian girls were commonly married off between the ages of 12 and 14, often to men twice or 3 times their age. No hidden secret. The state encouraged these unions to keep citizenship lines pure and property locked within families. Marriage wasn't just about family property. It controlled a woman's role in society, her body, her future, her capacity to bear heirs. Consent? Symbolic at best. Legally, marriage agreements were hammered out between fathers and future husbands. A girl's voice? Seldom heard. The ceremony, called the gamos, included torchlight processions, ritual sacrifices, and symbolic journeys to the husband's home. But beneath all the ceremonial poetry lay a simple, brutal fact. A child was leaving behind her childhood to become something she never chose: a wife, a mother, a tool to preserve lineage. In ancient Rome, the conditions were strikingly similar, if not even more codified. Girls could legally marry at 12 years old. Arrangements were orchestrated by the paterfamilias, the male head of the household who wielded near-total authority. Roman weddings were public spectacles. The bride, draped in a bright saffron veil, paraded in a procession, with rituals of fire and water to symbolize her acceptance into a new household. Yet behind these grand rituals, the truth remained the same. A woman's autonomy was tightly bound. Once married, she came under the legal power of her husband, or stayed under her father's, depending on the marriage type. Her main duties? Run the household, bear children, especially sons, and always embody the Roman ideals of chastity, modesty, and silence. Love, in the sense we understand it today, was rarely the foundation for these unions. Affection might develop over time, but just as easily, it might not. Excessive emotion could even be seen as weakness. What mattered was family interest, status, and honor, always. Virginity, above all, defined a bride's worth. In both Greece and Rome, a girl's perceived purity was inseparably tied to her family's standing. It was the proof that children born would be legitimate heirs. In Rome, the cult of Vesta elevated virginity to an almost sacred level, with priestesses sworn to celibacy for decades. Ordinary families felt the weight of these ideals too. Sometimes, proof of chastity was demanded. Ancient writings mention rituals or customs where signs were shown after the wedding night. These customs reveal how a young woman's body was not seen as hers, but as evidence, a testament to family honor, not personal agency. Sexual intimacy in these marriages was not about mutual pleasure or modern notions of consent. In Greek households, conjugal relations were the husband's right and the wife's duty. In Rome, the legal idea of debitum conjugale, the conjugal debt, made fulfilling marital expectations a legal obligation. But the burden of upholding these norms fell squarely on women. Refusing a husband's advances could mean shame, gossip, or even legal consequences. All of it reflected the deeply patriarchal values of the time, values that left little space for a woman's voice, let alone her choice. And there were customs that blurred the line between marriage and open coercion. In some Greek regions, if a man abducted a woman and spent a night with her, families might simply recognize the union afterward. The woman's feelings? Rarely recorded. In Sparta, a well-known ritual required shaving the bride's head, dressing her in men's clothes, then staging a symbolic abduction by the new husband. Presented as a tradition to ease her transition, it was at its core another reminder of male dominance, and the erasure of a woman's agency. Once married, a woman's legal existence was almost always bound to a man's authority. In Rome, for example, women could not vote, hold public office, or manage their own property without special arrangements. Their value was first and foremost reproductive, producing the next generation to secure the family line. If a wife could not bear children, she risked rejection or quiet replacement. Male infertility? Scarcely understood. Blame almost always fell on her, another burden she could not refuse. But this reality was not unique to the Greco-Roman world. In ancient Mesopotamia, clay tablets carved in careful script reveal the same patterns again and again. Girls married near puberty, tied by detailed clauses about fertility, obedience, and loyalty. If a wife could not conceive, she could be forced to accept a concubine, another woman in her household, there to bear children on her behalf. The wife's well-being, her sense of self, rarely, if ever, considered. Marriage was never just a private matter. It was a state interest, a social pillar that held families and communities together, often at the expense of women's freedom. In ancient China, arranged marriages bound families politically and socially. Young women were moved far from their childhood homes, expected to serve not just a husband, but his extended family, generation after generation. Confucian values of filial piety stretched deep into married life. A wife owed submission not only to her husband, but to his parents and elders too. A woman's worth was measured by her ability to bear sons, to keep the household peaceful, to obey, and above all, to remain silent. And what if she wanted to leave? For most, the answer was simple: she could not. Divorce existed, but the power rested almost entirely with men. In Athens, a man could send his wife away for nearly any reason. For a woman, however, petitioning for divorce meant facing a magistrate, risking her dowry, her children, her place in society. In Rome, only a privileged few elite women managed to obtain divorces under extraordinary circumstances. Abuse or neglect? Often overlooked. Infidelity by husbands? Widely tolerated. A man's discretion, not a woman's shame. But for wives, one rumor of betrayal could mean disgrace, banishment, or worse. Even the highest ranks offered no true protection. Powerful families could cast out their daughters when convenient, when their reputation was threatened or alliances shifted. Their status did not make them untouchable. Their lives were still, at the end of the day, pieces to be moved on a board. Useful until they were not. For common women and peasant girls, life could be even harsher. Families bartered daughters like livestock. Marriages used to settle debts, combine fields, or seal fragile truces. Love or courtship rarely mattered. Obligation and survival did. In some Roman communities, customs demanded public witnesses to the wedding night, or physical tokens to prove consummation. A private moment turned into proof, a body made into evidence. Religion and philosophy offered little shelter. Temples blessed these unions but rarely defended an individual's freedom to refuse or escape. Ideas rooted in Stoic or Confucian teachings praised virtues, but those virtues were obedience, modesty, and loyalty, not independence or equal power. These ideals fed directly into rigid marriage customs, repeating the same patterns century after century. Ancient Egypt sometimes appears as an exception, on paper. Marriage contracts could include property rights, inheritance clauses, even terms for divorce. But theory does not always match reality. Social pressures still forced girls to marry young, to submit, to carry the weight of family honor. Rights on clay tablets meant little when using them meant risking shame, blame, or exile from the only home they knew. Claims marriage is an unchanging sacred tradition. It's worth asking. Sacred for whom? Sacred for the fathers who traded daughters to erase debts? For the husbands who claimed women as property? For the priests and philosophers who spoke of virtue but demanded silence? These stories matter because they show the roots of ideas that shaped entire civilizations. They remind us how recently true choice and equality within marriage became possible, and how easily they can erode if we forget the price paid by so many who came before. Because what we call tradition was, for countless girls and women, a cage built in plain sight. And cages don't open by themselves. That is the reality of ancient marriage: brutal, complicated, and impossible to forget.